So there's a story told that the Rebbe Rashab, the fifth Lubavitch Rebbe, was with his son, the Friedrich Rebbe, and it was the day after Yom Kippur. And the Friedrich Rebbe said to his father, "So what now? What now?" And the Rebbe Rashab said, Now we start doing Teshuvah." One in truth has never finished doing Teshuvah. So today we're going to start the 9th chapter of Igeres Hatshuva. In the previous chapter, in Perek Ches, we learned about something called Teshuvah Ilah, a loftier, a higher form of Teshuvah. That is to say, that Teshuvah is not simply something which is performed in the aftermath of a rebellion against Hashem, a sin, an inappropriateness, bad behavior, but rather Teshuvah means to come closer to Hashem. And inasmuch as sin distances us from God, so obviously if there's sin, then there has to be Teshuvah to bring us closer to Hashem. But truth be told, you don't need sin to do Teshuvah. In fact, Mashiach's great accomplishment, according to the Zohar, will be La'asova tzadikaya b'tiyufta, which translates as to bring tzaddikim into Teshuvah. So clearly tzaddikim could do Teshuvah also, but tzaddikim doing Teshuvah is not a little thing. It's such a big deal, it's such a hard thing to accomplish, that this is really in the lap of Mashiach. But we're not tzaddikim. We have really no problem doing Teshuvah on a regular basis. Teshuvah is the process by which a person can reverse the distance that occurs as a result of life itself. Life itself in some way disfigures, inhibits, challenges the soul. That's what life does. And in fact, the process of being born or brought into existence, as we learned in the previous chapter, necessarily distances us from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We're trying to unwind or unravel that. Now, in the language of Kabbalah, which oftentimes uses symbols and characters, and especially of the Hebrew alphabet, we said that Teshuvah, there's a lower Teshuvah and a higher Teshuvah. And the word Teshuvah can be broken into two words, Tashuv Hey, return the Hey. So Teshuvah Tata, the lower Teshuvah, is to return Hey Tata, to get the lower Hey back. And Teshuvah Ilah, the higher Teshuvah, is to get the higher Hey back. What does this mean? So the Alter Rebbe explained that each and every single one of us has within him a divine code. The divine code is made up of the name of Hashem, which is Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, the ineffable name of God, the name we heard about yesterday in Shul, where the Kohen Gadol would pronounce this name, and when he pronounced it, everybody would be overwhelmed and literally fall on their faces because of the holiness in this name. In general, we don't know how to pronounce the name, and even if we did, we're not allowed to. We're not even allowed to mispronounce it or pronounce it as we think it might be. That's why we refer to it colloquially as Havaya, leaving the Yud off the beginning. So this name, Havaya, is not just a name, but it's a name that really is symbolic of and indicative of life itself, of existence itself. And we said Yud represents Chokhmah, or represents the initial flash. Everything begins with an idea. The Yud is the smallest letter in the Hebrew alphabet. It's just a dot with a couple of points, small points made. You make a dot of ink and you have a few sharp points. That's what a Yud is. Now there's 10 things that can go wrong with a Yud. That's why you have to check it, fill in the mezuzahs, but nonetheless, it's the simplest of letters. And the Hey is an interesting letter because the Hey can be broadened. In fact, in the Sefer Torah, when you have to get to the end of the line, if there's extra room, the Hey can be made wider. Wider or regular size. But that's the nature of Hey. Hey represents the concept of harchava, of development. Now, Yud then represents Chachma, or an idea, and everything begins with a flash of inspiration. Everything begins with an idea. As they say, there's nothing as powerful and valuable as an idea, and there's also nothing as worthless as an idea. It depends what you do with the idea. If you carry it out, then it's powerful. If you do nothing with it, idea comes, idea goes. Nothing lost, nothing gained. So everything begins with this glimmer, with this sudden explosion of light. From the idea of the way science describes the Big Bang to the concept of the Torah story of Genesis, of Yehi Or, everything begins with a light. Everything begins with a flash. That flash has to be developed. And we learned in the language of Kabbalah that the flash is called Chachma. Chachma is a seminal idea, or when somebody grasps an idea, is trying to figure something out, and suddenly the light goes on, and you get it. You have a light bulb moment, they call it. And then you have to develop the idea. And developing the idea in the language of Chassidus and Kabbalah is called Bina. Bina, which comes from the Hebrew terminology of Bona, to build, to develop. So every flash, every idea has to be constructed, developed, built in, fleshed in. And that's what we tend to do. People say sometimes, let me think about that. Let me sleep over it. I have to analyze it. I'll look at it carefully, and so on and so forth. That's all acts of Bina. This is called, in the language of Jewish mysticism, Abba and Ima, father and mother. Why? Because the intellect has the power to engender emotions. Invariably, things we're afraid of or things we're excited about, most of them are learnt. Most of them are not something which is innate or natural. In fact, babies are not really afraid of anything. At a certain point, they become frightened of things. There's an interesting statement, the Psikta of Rav Kahana, that says if a goat would go on the edge of a roof, it would know not to jump. But a child wouldn't. We're not born with fear of heights. The reason we have a fear of heights is because we get smart enough to know that if you fall off the edge, it's not going to be a pretty scene when you land. And some of us, for whatever reason, at a certain point in our life, maybe fell off something that was a little high, or saw somebody fall off, or warned in a certain way, and therefore we carry baggage from our youth, as Freud would say, and that's where we're more afraid of heights, or less afraid of heights. And even people who think that they're naturally afraid of heights, they can overcome that. So it's not innate, it's not natural. The goat doesn't have any seichel whatsoever. There's no intelligence, really. Minimal intelligence. So the goat is born with instinct. The goat can't learn to be afraid of heights. The goat can't learn to be afraid of a fire. He has to know. A child doesn't know to be afraid of fire. That's why we have the famous story with Moshe Rabbeinu, that the Pharaoh got a little bit nervous about this adopted son of his, adopted grandson. And he said his kid is too smart because he put his Pharaoh's crown on his own head. So all of a sudden Hashem makes a malach, an angel appear, and they say to the Pharaoh, the kid has no clue what he's doing. How would you know? So they say, you put two plates in front of him. One is a plate of jewels, and one will be a plate of coals. Which glows brighter? The coals. A child doesn't have the intelligence to know. And see which he chooses. You'll see. He'll put his hand in the coals. Well, Moshe Rabbeinu was very intelligent, and he did know to choose the diamonds and stay away from the coals, because he was far, far more mature than anybody imagined. However, last minute, an angelic force pushes Moshe's hand from the diamonds into the coal, saving his life, but Moshe burns his fingers, and immediately, intuitively, puts his hand in his mouth, which burnt his tongue. And Moshe Rabbeinu stuttered ever since. That's the story, the origin of Moshe Rabbeinu's stutter. Now, the point is that a regular child would not know the difference between a glowing coals and between diamonds. How should he know? These are things that are learnt. So once we learn things, we discover things, we get emotional about them, we care about them. Nobody's born rooting for the Blue Jays or the Maple Leafs, but people grow up in a city like Toronto, and that's the baseball team, or that's the hockey team, they get this loyalty, they develop this. Really, what difference does it make? The whole thing is mishigas, but that's how it is. It's a learned thing, it's an acquired thing, and people get crazy about it. You know, sports fans in Europe, they go on these like rampages. People get killed after these soccer matches. They're totally crazy. There's no way somebody was born coming out of the womb at the age of 5 minutes old when he's screaming Manchester City or London. It's not possible, right? And yet there's such powerful things. People's patriotism, the jingoism, and all these things are learnt. So when a person has intelligence, chachma and bina, when the chachma and bina come together, what happens is it engenders midas. It engenders the idea of relating to things. How do I relate to them? This I like, this I don't like. This I appreciate, this is something that makes me want to crawl, my skin crawl, I want to run away from it. Children don't really know. They're clueless. A child eats everything. Put him on the floor, puts everything in his mouth. Why does he put everything in his mouth? Is he stupid? No, he's a baby. He doesn't know better. He learns the hard way. And why is he putting it in his mouth? Because the tongue or the taste buds are the first thing that develops. So how does he make a difference between one thing and the other? He doesn't have fine motor skills. He doesn't even have, the nerves don't develop fully in the fingers. He doesn't even feel the way an adult feels. But what he does know is things taste differently. So whether it's your shoes, or whether it's food, whatever it's on the floor, he'll put it in his mouth. Anybody who's had a baby in the house knows it's like a terrifying thing. You wonder how many malachim have to watch over this kid. Actually, it turns out usually pretty good, because by putting strange things like that in their mouth, they develop a resistance. And if a child grew up in a bubble, he probably wouldn't be able to handle even a common flu. So the Eibishter knows what he's doing. But we're still really nervous, and we try to watch the kids, and they shouldn't do things like that. Point being, there's things we learn. These learned emotions, these learned things that makes us into mature individuals. So we have Chachma and Bina, and then we have the idea of Vav. Vav represents emotions, and emotions represents how we relate, how we connect. And then there's that final Hey. Then there's, okay, so what are you going to do about it? Which represents, in the language of Kabbalah, what's called Ze'er Ampin. There's Arach Ampin, large face, or a lot of Pnimius, a lot of my personality mixed in. That refers to the intelligence. And then there's Ze'er Ampin, which is a small face that refers to the Midas, to how I relate to things. And then there's Malchus. Malchus is the last thing. Malchus is actually speaking sometimes, or Malchus is getting involved, taking responsibility, etc. Which is what a melech does. That's what a king or a queen does. They take responsibility for a country. So what is Teshuvah Elah and Teshuvah Tata? Teshuvah Elah means to return, since the Hey is found twice in Yud Kei Vav Kei, the Hey has to be connected to the Vav, and the Hey has to be connected to the Hey. That's what falls off. The Hey falls off. In other words, a person will have all the right feelings. So I'm a Jew at heart. Then why aren't you living like a Jew? Oh, I don't have to live like that too? I feel good about being Jewish. I feel good about doing these things. So if I feel good about it, isn't that good enough? It's an interesting thing. Friday I was on that radio. And so I said to Zelda, that spoke about Yom Kippur. So what is Yom Kippur? And I spoke about Yom Kippur. And I said, I would hope that people shouldn't violate Yom Kippur. Because if you don't violate it, then you get to keep it. So I hope they walk the shul. So I said, I hope. And if you can't walk the shul, so stay home and daven. She said, that's ridiculous. Nobody's going to listen to you. Why were you saying this on the radio? She said, they'll just drive a block away and walk. I said, why? There are shuls everywhere. Why would they have to do that? So, and as I'm saying this, I'm getting a text message on my phone from somebody who's listening saying, okay, fine, I'm going to stay home on Yom Kippur. So I tell her, by the way, I just got a text message, somebody saying that they're listening to the radio and they are going to stay home because they don't want to violate Yom Kippur. Okay, very nice. So then I get an email from her like an hour later that somebody emailed her that the rabbi is ridiculous and it's not rewarding to stay home. It's much more rewarding to be able to sit in shul, listen to Kol Nidre. To which I responded, serving God is not chocolate cake. It doesn't matter if it tastes good or it feels rewarding. It matters what's right and what's wrong. So we try to do what's right. That's all. The right thing. What if the wrong thing feels good? You do it? Do we subscribe to if it feels good, do it? If I like it, then I should do it. If I don't like it, I shouldn't do it. That's not what Yiddishkeit's about. That's not what serving Hashem is about. It's more like if it's right, I should do it. If it's not right, if it's wrong, I shouldn't do it. And if the wrong thing makes me feel good, that's too bad. Maybe doing the right thing often enough will make me feel better. Maybe I'll develop a feeling for Yiddishkeit. And this is what we all yearn for, a feeling. We should feel good about our Yiddishkeit. It shouldn't be miserable, it shouldn't be hard, it shouldn't be painful. It should be a good feeling. That's a gift. Either you develop it or you don't. Now, good feelings, they're very easy. They come almost innately. So if somebody has any kind of Jewish background, they're going to feel good about being Jewish. But that doesn't mean you're going to live Jewishly. And when people behave sinfully, they still feel good about being Jewish. They still feel very proud about being Jewish. In fact, sometimes they justify their sinful behavior and they speak of how good they feel about being Jewish, and that's why they're doing it. There are a dime a dozen people like this. They always talk about their Jewish feelings. So really, if you have these Jewish feelings, why aren't you doing Jewish things? Well, no, this is the way I want to do it. So Vav is emotions. The Vav is usually in place. What falls off the wagon? The Hey. What is the Hey? The Hey is what I carry out, or what I don't carry out. So what's Teshuvah? Teshuvah is to restore the Hey to the Vav. Bring the Hey home. And then there's a deeper and profound level of Teshuvah. It's not about action. It's not about doing the wrong thing or a sin of omission, missing out what was right. But rather, a person who is not only going to have the right idea, the right subliminally the right idea, but they're actually going to develop and ruminate on and nurture this profound connection with Hashem. So like the Alter Rebbe says, that a Yid nicht will, nicht ken sein Igeres von Göttlichkeit. How do you define a Jew, says the Alter Rebbe? Not he wants, nor can he bring himself to tear himself away from God. That's on a level of Chachma. Like we learned earlier in Tanya, the concept of Chachma, the Chachma always remains the way it should be. What happens? Well, the Bina is not the way it should be. I'm not actively thinking about it. I'm not actively ruminating it. My head's somewhere else. But that has nothing to do with action, necessarily. A person could have a muddled idea, Yiddishkeit-wise, but they're staying focused. So just because I did Teshuvah or restored the Hey back to the Vav, which means I regret having done the wrong thing and I resolve not to do it again, doesn't mean that I've re-engineered my attitude to life. It doesn't mean that I really look at things properly. And this is the notion of Teshuvah Law. Teshuvah Law means when I transform myself, when I start looking at life differently, when I become elevated and exalted in my perspective, in my Weltanschauung, I'm a different person. Teshuvah Tata is changing my behavior. Teshuvah Law is changing my person. It's changing my personality. I become a spiritually minded, holy person. Not holy innately, but holy. I'm living holy. I feel my mind is in a holy place. I'm feeling closer to Hashem. So this is what we talked about. This is a little preface that leads up to Perek Tes. So what's the problem with this? Here's the problem with this thesis. The problem is that when the Alter Rebbe talked to us about the concept of Teshuvah Ilah, he said that Teshuvah Ilah is accomplished through the study of Torah. And the Alter Rebbe also told us that Teshuvah Ilah means, how do I study Torah? I study Torah with a passion, with a fervor. I'm emotionally engaged. He says to study Torah b'chei yater, which is Aramaic for with more passion, with more ahava, with more yira, with more reverence, with more awe, with more love. And when I serve Hashem with greater fervor, that's called Teshuvah Ilah. So what's the problem? The problem is that Teshuvah Ilah, the higher form of Teshuvah, resonates within the Yud and the Hey, restoring the higher Hey, not the lower Hey. But the higher Hey and the higher Yud are all intellectual. They represent the cerebral properties. Yud is Chachma, as we said, and Hey is Bina. So if Yud is Chachma and Hey is Bina, so then why would I have to talk about emotions, which Alter Rebbe did? He said that you serve Hashem with greater fervor. Fervor is an emotion. It's a passion, is all in the realm of emotion. So that belongs in the lower part of Teshuvah. That belongs in the Vavke. Understand the innate problem? Here he's talking about passion, here he's talking about feelings, here he's talking about fervor, and he's talking about Teshuvah Ilah. He's talking about the higher form of Teshuvah. But the lower form of Teshuvah is to restore the lower Hey to the Vav. The Vav represents the Midas. The Hey represents how I'm behaving. The higher Hey, restored to the Yud, is to connect Bina, what I'm actually thinking about, and how I'm actually understanding things, to Chachma, to my innate, natural sense of idea where ideas just come from. So if the concept of Teshuvah Ilah, I'm going to straighten it a little bit. No, just take the top thing, push it a little this way. Perfect. If the concept of Teshuvah Ilah is described in the terms of emotion, in terms of passion, that I become passionately involved, even more passionate than before. That before I studied Torah with some kind of fervor, and I was involved in my davening, but it wasn't so passionate. Now, after having coming back from when doing the wrong thing, all of a sudden I have as infused with a newfound passion. And the metaphor is that somebody who was thirsty, and then they get to drink, they appreciate that the water they're drinking ever so much more. Why? Because they were actually thirsty. And we say, Tzama l'cha nafshi, what creates the yearning, the craving, the thirst for Hashem? Being be'eretz tzia v'oyef, being in a land which is parched and dry. So when you don't have something, then you want it even more. As they say, absence makes the heart grow fonder. So if that's the case, if this is all the notion, this is all within the realm of the intellect, because that's what Yud K is. Yud K is Chachma, and Hey is Bina. And Teshuvah Ilah means restore the higher Hey to back to its source. That means I had this innate, my ideas were right. My compass deep down under all the narishkeit and all the superficial confusion, my compass was in the right place, but I wasn't actually thinking about the right thing. And I was like in a muddled, confused state. And Teshuvah means I have the sudden clarity. And now I'm restoring the Hey back to the Yud, which is bringing the Bina back to the Chachma. If the Bina is coming back to the Chachma, why are we talking about emotions? Why are we talking about fervor? Why are we talking about passion? The intellect and passion are actually diametrically opposed. Because the intellect is cold, the intellect is calculating, the intellect is in its essence objective, whereas the emotions are passionate, seething, and subjective. A person could have an idea. It could be in an ivory tower style. He's disconnected from whatever's being talked about. He understands it really well. He could explain it to anybody. He's indifferent to it. It doesn't make a difference to him. It doesn't change his life. And then he could explain the very opposite to you as well. And that doesn't change his life either. Why? It's just ideas. Ideas don't have to change my life. One way of looking at it. Here's another way of looking at it. There are many ways of looking at it. It doesn't have to. She says, how could you look at it one way and then look at it the other way? On the contrary, I consider myself to be an intellectual, and therefore as an intellectual I can look at things one way and then look at them the other way. I can entertain opposite ideas. I can entertain polarizing realities. Now emotionally, that's another story. If somebody says, I love this, and I can't stand that, and then a moment later they say, well actually, I really love the other thing, and I can't stand the first thing. So you sound very confused. Which one do you love? I love being hot. I love the hot weather. I hate it when it's cold. Actually, I love when it's cold and I hate it when it's hot. You sound like a crazy person. Like, where are you? You can't be drawn in different directions. You can't have an emotional, this makes you excited and something else makes you unhappy. This makes you unhappy and then something else makes you excited. You can't be happy and unhappy at the same time. You can be happy and unhappy about different elements of something, because things are conglomerations often and they have positive elements and negative elements, but you cannot be happy and unhappy about the very same thing. That makes no sense. A person could say, I love to fast. Okay, then you should be very happy that you're hungry. Actually, I hate being hungry. You can't love to fast and hate being hungry. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up. Intellectually, a person could say, I see the value in fasting. I see the value. I see it's good, and I can be disciplined, and so on and so forth. The person could say, it's ridiculous to fast because it's self-denying and just flagellating. And why would it? I see the value. I can see value in each. I can see an approach in each. I can see opposite ideas. Why? Because the intellect is objective. I cannot feel opposite feelings unless something is seriously wrong with me. Or I think that I'm feeling it. Even if something's wrong with me, the truth is it can't be so. A person could think so, or try to convince others that it's the case, but it can't be the case. So this is the issue. This is the issue that rises out of Perek Ches, that issue that rises out of the 8th chapter, which the Alter Rebbe is now going to approach. Say, okay, how do we figure this out? Because what I said actually doesn't seem to hold water. It's contradictory in its very essence. So therefore, the Alter Rebbe says, the explanation of this idea, what is the meaning of that ahava v'yira, that love and fervor, love and reverence, which is the idea that positive and negative emotions, the respect that we feel for Hashem, the awe we feel for Hashem, along with the excitement, the passion, the exuberance, and the love. What is the connection to that? And the idea of Teshuvah, says the Alter Rebbe, this is along the lines of what's written in the Holy Book of Zohar, and as well as the Tikkunim, the codicils of the Zohar. And this is not something which is in one place. It's B'kama Mekaymis. It's in many places. That it says, the Bina, Ihi Teshuvah, that Bina, Teshuvah is about Bina, which makes perfect sense, because the hay, restoring the hay is Bina. Hay is Bina. So if Bina is Teshuvah, restoring the hay, that's the restoration of hay, is restoration of Bina. That makes sense. So what does this mean? So the language that's used to metaphorize this is taken from Parshas Kiseitze, where it speaks about the mitzvah of sending away the mother bird, and it says, "V'ha'eim revetzes al ha'efreichem." That's a scriptural expression. It means that the mother bird is nesting on the children, on the offspring, on its young. So what does that mean? Like many things you read the Zohar, it makes no sense if you don't understand the profundity of it. Okay, great. So Teshuvah is Bina, and that's the nesting mother. That's the nesting bird. Oh, that's so profound. What does it mean? Explains the Alter Rebbe, the Hainu, when a person contemplates the greatness of Hashem, and he does so b'hamokas hadas, really attaching yourself to this idea that it's something which is relevant for you, something which is meaningful, something that's important, because that's the way you really understand things, when you need to understand them. So people who are not really interested in what's being taught, they don't understand it. Did you get it? No, not really. Why? Because I don't care to get it. I don't care to understand it. A genius is a person who can understand things very easily, and a person who's rather dim doesn't understand things. You repeat it 5 times, 6 times. Oh, yeah, I get it. Took me a bunch of times. But it's amazing when somebody really needs to understand something, maybe because their life depends upon it, maybe because there's something really important to them, all of a sudden they understand very quickly. When somebody they really enjoy, they like learning about this, they understand it like this. There's a fellow I know who's an older man in his 70s in Brooklyn. He's a very, very wealthy individual. Not so accomplished in the realm of piety and spirit and scholarship, but just a very, very shrewd businessman. And my father told me he remembers in yeshiva that they were learning one chapter of Gemara called Perek Hazov, Masechet Bava Metzia, that speaks about money. And that was the one semester this kid did fantastic. When they learned about money, he was on. He doesn't interest in anything else. It's like from an early age. This is what he did. This lit his candle. The trick would be, of course, to find what lights each kid's candle. And to learn, every kid should learn by what interests them. But when we're interested in it, when it's something that holds an allure for us, we understand it. Why? Because we won't understand it. And the more we need to, the more we want to, the better we understand. That's just the way, that's the way it goes. And it's all about it being important to us. That's the idea of hamokas hadas. Das is like an opinion. Das is kind of like, we call it the emotive dimension of the intellect. Because an opinion, I can't have two opinions. I can't think yes and no at the same time. I can only have one opinion. An opinion is almost emotional in the fact that it's subjective. Opinions are subjective by their very nature. So if somebody has a strong opinion or somebody's opinionated, he may not be passionate, he may not be emotional, he may not be fervor-filled, but he's not budging. There are people who are very cold, very unemotional, and very opinionated. That's my opinion. I don't care. I'm not changing my opinion. This is what I believe is right, and that's the way I feel is right, and that's the way it's going to be. It's not objective. So it's emotion-like. Now the Rebbe says, what kind of isbonenus, what kind of contemplation do we speak of here? Contemplation is b'hamakas hadas. Hamakas hadas means it's something that's relevant for me. It's important for me. I need to know this. I need to understand this. So when you think about it, and you need to know it because you want to know it, because it's important to you, what happens then it's moiled miruach binasei dechile v'rechimu sichlim. Then what happens is it engenders offspring. What's the proverbial offspring of deep contemplation, of wanting to know something and understanding something fully? What's the result of that? The result of that is emotions. That's where opinions come from, actually. And then opinions distill into how I feel about something. So therefore, in Kabbalah, the metaphor that's used for Chachma and Bina is Ava ve'ima, like I said before, Ava Eim, known by the acronym Ava. Why Ava Eim? Because the idea comes out of nowhere. It's what we call a seminal idea, which actually bases itself on the chemistry of how a human being is created. So the male, the masculine, which is Chachma, makes a small contribution, a flash. And the feminine dimension develops that flash and builds a human being out of it. It takes 9 months in the technical description of how a human being is created. There's a male contribution, a female contribution. There's Chachma, which seeds an idea, Bina, which develops an idea. And sometimes the idea, you're not actively thinking. Sometimes the idea is incubating. Sometimes like you go through a gestational period where you're thinking about this idea, and sometimes people hear something and they don't get that. And it doesn't really mean anything to them. It doesn't change them. But they're always thinking about it. Somehow you got them to think. They're thinking and thinking and thinking. It could be a month, could be 6 months, could be years later when a person really gets it. So now I really, some things came together in a certain way, which suddenly everything fits together. Now it really makes sense to me. Now I get it. And that would be what we call the Chachma and Bina working together. Hopefully Bina doesn't take us years. Hopefully we get it a little faster and it develops an emotion. But when that happens, when Bina gets it, when the contemplation results in a practical, real, well-based understanding of something, when I really get it, invariably I start to get excited about it or to get fearful of it. So on a very, very simple level, let's go back to our child on the roof. Why isn't he afraid to walk along the edge of the roof? Because he never saw anybody fall off a roof. He doesn't know that there's a problem when you walk off a roof. And there were crazy stories in the 70s of children who are jumping out of windows in Superman costumes. Because that's what it's on television. It's on movies. Superman jumps at the window. There was a child who died, Rahman al-Atsan, because he got these crazy ideas. So this guy put on a suit and jumped at the window. Must be he could jump at the window. That's what the child learned. So if that's what he learned, then that seems normal to him. So the more a person would have an understanding of what happens, the more they become frightened of it. Like just plain simple. Or if a child is educated in a certain way and told certain things continuously, eventually what happens? Become very emotionally involved. They get, I care about this, I want this. Or not. I fear it. I'm uncomfortable with it. I mean, all of racism is taught. It's not a natural thing. A child doesn't know. But these things are taught and they're caught from parents and from environment. And then it becomes so visceral. It becomes such a profound emotion. So this is the idea of contemplation. It's moiled miruach binasei dechile v'dechile sichlim. From the cerebral spirit comes, or the spirit of understanding comes eventually what we call emotional intellect, or intellectual emotions. Uvetuv tam v'das, and then this gives a proper understanding of something. And what happens eventually is that the proper understanding of something engenders or results in an exuberance or a concern, a fear or a joy. I want something, I'm drawn to it, or I repel it, push it away. It makes my skin crawl, or it relaxes me. You know, that whole feng shui thing, and things that we're used to, things that we've become accustomed to, or things that we understand. Our education has everything to do with the way we're going to grow up. Right? That's why people talk about this pipe dream, this dangerous, murderous pipe dream of Rahman al-Atsan two-state solutions. When you have, it's patently impossible. It's impossible. Why? Because besides all the other challenges, you have a school system that's feeding children with hatred and educating them to hate and to kill from nursery. It's not possible to make peace. The whole thing is insane. All it is putting lives in danger. That's all it's accomplishing. So, if only we're going to give enough land, and then it's going to be peace. It's not possible. There's a whole generation now, funded by the United Nations and tragically Israel, that it planted such hatred that it's basically impossible to undo. You can't change it. It's so deep-rooted. Maybe in a few individuals could be changed, but there's nothing to talk about. The whole thing is moot. It's a disaster. But this is, again, it's all about education. It's all about seichel. It's all about intelligence. It's about hearing ideas and then ruminating ideas and developing ideas. And then when that happens, you have intelligence. Like, for example, a person should think about Hashem. Like it says, La'avas Hashem Elokecha, to love the Lord your God. Why? Ki hu chayecha, because He is your life. So when a person contemplates this idea that God is life itself, and everybody wants life, everybody loves life. I've met a person who says, I hate life. I wish life wasn't anymore. Somebody says that and not well. That's a very, very sick state of mind. That somebody doesn't want to live anymore. Someone to commit suicide. That's not normal. What's normal is people want to survive. People want to live. People love life. They want life. Who doesn't want life? But where does life come from? It comes from God. When you're very, very tired and you desperately want to get to sleep, get back to yourself. You have this craving, this powerful urge just to go to sleep, just to refresh yourself. That means you're craving life. You're trying to get life back. So trying to get life back, where does life come from? It comes from God. So really, what are we asking for when we're yearning and crave for that life? Really and truly, we're asking to be reconnected to Hashem. And truth be told, everybody yearns and craves for spirituality. That's the truth. Maybe not overtly, but if you put up a sign that if everybody could have a God experience or experience to speak to God for 5 minutes, people would give everything away for that 5 minutes if they actually believed it. The problem is they don't believe it. They don't believe when you come to shul you're going to experience God. They don't believe that when you learn Torah you're going to experience God because they don't believe it. So they're not interested in doing anything for it. For a Yid who does believe it, for a Yid who's experienced it, he gives everything away. And Yidden were Meiser Nefesh. They sacrifice their lives not to be separated from Hashem, not to go away from Yiddishkeit. So it's Ki hu chayecha. And this is loy dai, loy ba'ava tivis emusuteres levad. It's not sufficient to rely on the natural love which every one of us has for Hashem. And there is a natural love that we said before, nishter ken and nishter vil, he doesn't want nor can he separate himself from God. Why is he so connected to God? What do you want? Because of Yid. There's an ava misuteres. There's deep down under all the layers, there's this feeling of connection. But a person could live just by that, or a person could say, no, I want to nurture that. There's an innate connection between parents and children. It's innate. Can't do anything about it. You could divorce your children. You're still going to feel pain. You could divorce your husband or your wife and get over it. You can never divorce your children and get over it. It doesn't work. I told you many years ago, there's a woman having major issues with her children, and I wanted to make a point to her. I said, I thought about it. I think you should divorce your son. So she said to me, what are you talking about? I said, you divorce your husband, divorce your son. You told me you don't care about your husband anymore. If you're over him, it took you a few years, you're over. Divorce your son. You have so much pain. It's bothering you so much. She said, I can't do that. I said, why not? Take him to the court. Divorce. Okay. She said, do you know how painful that would be? I said, why? Because it's my son. I said, that's my point. You're right. It's an organic relationship. You can never sever it. It may not be an enjoyable relationship. It may not be a nice relationship. It may be a horrible relationship. It may be a relationship that's filled with pain instead of filled with goodness and love. But it's still there. It's innate. So the fact that a Jew is being rebellious against Hashem is indicative of a relationship with God. A very bad relationship, but still a relationship. There's that famous story that Chatzkel Sofer tells. He's like a Chabad rabbi in the University of Beersheba. And there was one professor who never came to any classes, any activities, and he challenged him. He said, how come you don't come? He said, you know who I am? I'm a Holocaust survivor. I don't believe in God. I don't believe in anything. In fact, he said, I eat pork every single Shabbos. So the rabbi said, you eat pork on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, or only on Shabbos? He said, no, dafka, only on Shabbos. To which the rabbi wisely noted, he said, you don't not believe in God, you're angry at God. But you believe in God. If you ate pork on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, it would be because you enjoy pork. The fact that you make a point of eating pork dafka on Shabbos shows there is a connection. Wonderful. How great would that be? All Jews have a connection to God, so they eat pork on Shabbos, and maybe on Yom Kippur too. That's not very healthy. It's not a good relationship. So how do we develop the relationship? We can't just rely on the natural, innate connection. We have to develop the connection. How do you develop the connection? Oh, so that comes through the intelligence. That comes through education. The more you study Torah, the more you learn, the more you know, the more you have a proper emotion that develops afterwards. And the same thing is b'yireh v'fachad. The same thing is with reverence, with awe, or sometimes busha. A person is ashamed. Azai nikrei sa'em revetzes halafreichem. That's called the bird is nesting. Why is the bird nesting? Because it's different expressions of Chassidus. Sometimes they talk about an egg, and sometimes they talk about young. Here the Alter Rebbe talks about the young, not the eggs. The young, the eggs have hatched. The birds, the little chicks, they're there. You ever see like a nest with the mother bird comes and sticks the food in their mouth? It's an amazing thing. We had this little nest outside my house, and I was watching. The mother, she puts her beak like down into the kishkas. You think she doesn't puncture the kishkas, but she does with tremendous speed. Like puts her head in like boom, 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 boom. It's like sticking worms in the kid's mouth. She's feeding the kid. She's taking care of the kid. Then she's sitting on them and keeping them warm and caring for them. In other words, they are independent, but they're only independent because they're not in the egg anymore. Or they were independent from the beginning. There's no pregnancy there. It's in an egg. And then the egg is being constantly taken care of. So what was our question? Our question was, this is Teshuvah law. Teshuvah law is intellect. Teshuvah law is restoring the Hey back to the Yud. The Hey and the Yud is Chachma and Bina. And you're telling me about Ava V'yireh. How can it be Ava V'yireh? How can it be passion and emotion? It's connected to the idea of the cerebral reality. What's the answer? Where do you think the emotions come from? Where do you think the emotions come from? The emotions come from the thought, from the contemplation. And not only the emotions come from the thought. The truth is that the emotions are constantly connected to the thought process that engendered them. And that's why it's possible to redevelop an emotion. A person can feel like not disinterested in something, and then he just has to think about it all over again. What happens when he thinks about it all over again? He gets excited the way it was the first time. Which is why in the morning we spend time studying Torah before davening, and we have long davening. And then once we establish that foundation, when it comes time for mincha, it's not so easy to it's not so hard to get back to it. You just get back to it. The point of davening is not that you should be connected with Hashem for an hour in the morning or for an hour and a half when you start your day. The point is to build a foundation for the rest of your day. When you daven in the morning, when you learn Chassidus in the morning, the rest of your day is the way it should be. And if it isn't, you can get back to it very quickly. But when you go to sleep and you wake up, you're a new person. You have to start all over again. That's why the davening has to be first thing in the morning. That's where the study of Torah is right away in the morning, because that builds the foundation. So our question was, what does this have to do with the idea of intellect? It has everything to do with emotions, Intellect and emotion are two worlds. Alter Rebbe says, no, actually not. That's why the Zohar metaphorizes as the bird who's nesting. So the nesting bird means that Teshuvah, which is even on the level of intellect, the level of consciousness, that Teshuvah is still going to be passion-fueled. It's still going to be emotionally infused. Why? Because they always remain connected. Because the intelligence is what leads to those emotions. And therefore, it will be a mistake to think that the realm of intellect and the realm of emotion are two separate realities. In fact, one engenders the other, one seeds the other, one constantly breathes life into the other. And therefore, it's not illogical to say that Teshuvah Ilah, which speaks about the cerebral reality, Chachma and Bina, is demonstrated when a person studies Torah, b'cheli yatir, with greater fervor. And this we shall continue.
Thank you.